Winter of 1887. The blizzard roared over Dakota Territory like a church organ gone mad, swallowing sound and hope in the same breath. At the wind-bitten depot in Laramie City, a young woman sat rigid on a splintered bench, breath fogging in pale ghosts. She clutched a cracked carpetbag that held her world, $3 silver, a worn daguerreotype, and a bundle of dreams going numb in the midnight cold. What happened next would be told from the Colorado canyons clear to the Canadian prairie, how a single kindness bent 2 lives toward history in the raw-boned American West. The wind knifed through the depot boards that December night. Eleanor Nell Whitcomb drew her thin wool cape tighter, but the cold walked right through it. Her fingers had been pins and needles for hours. Her lips were the blue of creek ice. The last eastbound had pulled out 3 hours prior, and the morning train might never come if the drifts took the line. Back in Baltimore, Nell had been a hospital midwife, steady hands, clearer head, until the committee's favorite philanthropist tried to corner her in the medicine closet. She broke Mr. Caldwell's wrist with a brass mortar and got herself dismissed for unladylike conduct. Gossip traveled faster than lightning. No respectable ward would take her after that, so she'd taken her savings and her pride and ridden west, aiming for any mining town desperate enough to hire skill over rumor. Her money died in Laramie. The boarding house turned her out when the coins ran thin. Now she waited on a frozen bench with a small satchel of instruments and the final proof of who she was, certificates, threadbare but true. Hoofbeats thudded like distant thunder across crusted snow. Through the storm's chalk swirl, a rider emerged on a coppery mare, cloak flung back, hat brim low. He dismounted in one fluid motion, tied the reins, and stepped inside with a gust of white. "Evenin', ma'am," he said, touching his brim. His voice warmed the room, Mexican lilt smoothed by years of range wind. "Nasty night to be here alone." Nell's teeth chattered her reply into fragments. The man took her in, the satchel, the posture, the ruined gloves mended thrice. 30, perhaps, dark hair, a scar at the jawline like a stray brushstroke, boots polished but not fancy. He had the look of a man who could read weather, and men with equal success. "Name's Mateo Navarro. Most folks say Teo," he said, stripping off his gloves. "I run the Crescent Moon spread 20 miles northwest. Came to settle accounts with the stock buyer, but I saw you through the window." His gaze flicked to her bag. "You a doctor?" Midwife," she managed. "Nurse. Eleanor Whitcomb, Baltimore." Teo's brow lifted. A trained woman of medicine was rarer than peaches in January. "You'll freeze if you stay," he said simply. "Depot stoves busted, and the wind hates fools." He shrugged off his heavy sheepskin and draped it over her shoulders. Heat climbed her bones. The coat smelled of leather, wood smoke, and juniper soap. "Can you stand?" Her legs refused command. Teo swept her up, bag, pride, and all. "Hotel's across the street," he said, stepping back into the storm. "We'll thaw you out and figure the rest after." Pressed against his chest, Nell felt, unreasonably, safe. She didn't know this man, but she knew gentleness when it looked her in the eye. "Before we roll the clock back, tell me where you're listening from. And tap subscribe if you love true frontier romances." The Empress Hotel had notions of grandeur and carpets to match. When Teo Navarro shouldered through the doors with a half-frozen woman in his arms, conversation paused mid-sentence. The clerk, Perkins, thin as a fence slat, hurried over. "Senor Navarro, saints preserve us." "Room with a fire," Teo said. "Soup, coffee, hot stones for the bed. Send for Doc Harlan if he hasn't lit out." "Right away, sir." Perkins pushed a key across the counter. 12. "I'll send blankets." Upstairs, Teo set Nell by the hearth and fed the flames until they purred. A knock delivered quilts, coffee, and a modest supper. Another brought a borrowed dress and woolens from Mrs. Abernathy's trunk. She said any lady with ice on her lashes is kin tonight. Nell sipped coffee that tasted like life returning. Teo watched the color crawl back into her face. "You know your triage," she said, voice steadier. "Ranch'll teach a man," he said with a half-smile. "Horses go lame, men do worse, and the nearest sawbones can be a prayer away. But I'm no midwife." She told him the short of it. Charity ward, A rich trustee with wandering hands, a broken wrist, a ruined reputation. Anger flashed quick in Teo's eyes. He tried to take what wasn't his, he said, low. You put him on the floor. The corner of his mouth twitched. Good. For my trouble I earned a train ticket west and a permanent whisper. Nell stared into the fire. I thought out here skill might be louder than gossip. It is, Teo replied. On my range, a steady hand matters more than a pedigree. Another knock. A housemaid delivered the dress and left them alone with a crackle. Teo rose. I'll wait in the hall while you change, not for your reputation, though I respect it. For mine. Mr. Navarro, she said softly before he reached the door. Why help me? Teo rested his palm on the knob. Maybe because someone helped my mother cross a hard winter with a newborn and no husband, he said. Maybe because I've been hunting a healer for 6 months. He met her eyes fully. Maybe because a man knows a good soul when she's shaking in his coat. In the morning, sun burned the storm to diamonds. Teo arrived with a tray and a shy smile. Hungry? Nell ate like a person who'd remembered how. When she'd finished, Teo leaned back. I'll speak plain. Mining camps chew people up, especially women. I've got 60 riders now, double that in spring. We bleed and break. We buried men for lack of proper care. I can pay fair money, stock a clinic, and give you a cabin near the big house. Cook's name is Alma. She'll keep you fed, and she'll boss me if you don't. His grin was quick as a flicker's tail. Interested? What do you ask in return? Nell said, keeping her gaze steady. Your skill, your judgment. Some lessons for green hands so they stop pouring kerosene on cuts. His expression sobered. Nothing else owed. If someday there's more, it'll be because you want it, not because I own a ledger. Nell considered the window, where sunlight slammed off snowfields. When do we ride? Soon as Perkins can find you a decent coat, Teo said, standing. Welcome to the Crescent Moon, Nurse Whitcomb. They rode out by midday, Teo on his copper mare. Nell perched on a steady dapple named Clover, wrapped in a new buffalo coat Teo insisted was an advance. The land spread in white folds, cut by a creek where they watered and laughed at the shock of breaking ice. Teo pointed with his chin at cottonwoods, a basalt outcrop like a sleeping buffalo, and finally the fence-lean markers of his ranch. The place lay in a long valley, big house of timber and stone, bunkhouse, smoke curling from kitchen chimneys, blacksmith's forge throwing sparks into blue air. Men shaded their eyes as the riders came in. Boys, Teo called, swinging down. This is Eleanor Whitcomb, Nell. She's our new nurse. Cheers like saloon doors flapped open. Tomas Ortega, trail boss with a beard like a raven's wing, stepped forward, cradling a wrapped hand. Cut it on wire yesterday. Stings like a hornet. We'll see it clean, Nell said, a little flush rising at the honest welcome. Teo showed her the cabin, a sun-bright room that smelled of fresh plain wood, a small bedroom, and a side door into a tidy space that already housed an exam table, shelves of bandages, a sterilizer kettle, glass vials labeled in Alma's neat hand. Been ordering since spring, Teo admitted. Hoped someday it'd be used by someone who knew more than folklore and grit. Nell's throat went tight. You built me a chance. You'll build the rest, he said. By sundown she'd cleaned Tomas's hand, lanced a boil, stitched a brow, and scolded 3 men into boiling their drinking water. After supper, a gentle rap at her door, Teo with 2 tin mugs. Alma sent chocolate, he said. Says it cures homesickness and poor manners. They sat by the hearth. Teo stared into the flames a beat too long. Honesty, then sleep, he said. I'd asked around in town. Perkins said a trained midwife had passed through asking about work. I would have found you either way. But I want you there because you choose us, not because I dragged you from a bench. I'm here because I chose, Nell said. And because your coat is indecently warm. Teo's smile flickered, then held. I'm also drawn to you. That's separate from your job. Your place here won't change if your answer to that is no. Nell felt heat rise that had nothing to do with the fire. It isn't no, she said quietly. It's not yet. Spring came early and green. Nell learned the rhythms, dawn coffee, rounds in the yard, births in stalls and bedrooms alike. Men who'd thought boiling a needle was superstition learned to trust the click of her instruments and the steadiness of her gaze. Evenings often found Teo and Nell on her porch, trading stories. His years as a cavalry scout turned rancher, her tide of city hospitals and narrow hallways where lives turned on a heartbeat. One gold and violet evening, Teo's voice turned grave. "I was married," he said, "young. Her name was Isabella. Fever took her 3 winters ago. We wanted children. The Lord had other plans." Nell reached across the small distance and folded his fingers in hers. "She must have been good." "She was," he said. "She was not you. You are a thunderhead and a tender hand in the same skin. I love that." She opened her mouth, but the yard erupted, hooves shouting. Tomas pounded up. Colt blew through the corral, spooked the herd. "Young Eli's down." The bunkhouse table became an operating board. Eli, 18, his eyes rolled white, fought for air under crushed ribs. "No time for Doc Harlan," Nell said. "Boil water, lamps close. Tomas, you're my left hand." For 3 hours the room was only breath, blood, and will. Nell opened, set, stitched. Men stood with heads bared as if in church. When Eli's chest rose slow and regular, Alma sobbed into her apron and the room remembered how to breathe. Harlan arrived later, blinking at the neat rows of sutures. "As fine as any surgeon from St. Louis," he said, half in awe, half in disbelief. Teo, silent in the doorway, looked at Nell like a man who had found the North Star and never planned to lose it again. That night on the porch, moon laying a silver path across the yard, Teo took both her hands. "Nell, I love you. I think I knew it the instant you called me Mr. Navarro like it was a verdict. Marry me." "It's fast," she said, smiling despite the tears. "It's everything. Answer when your heart is steady," he said. "I'll be here at sunup and sundown either way." Word traveled at the speed of delight. The riders approved, Alma approved louder. Even Perkins sent a ribbon with a note. For the bride, what broke winter in half. They married the first Saturday of June beneath an arch of willow alma, and the hands wove before dawn. The circuit rider spoke of partnership forged in work and weather. "Do you, Mateo Alejandro Navarro, take Eleanor Rose Whitcomb?" "I do," Teo said, voice sure as a fence post. "I do," Nell answered, steady as a surgeon's thread. The party was a miracle of beef, trout, fiddle tunes, and laughter that traveled clean to the creek. Eli, pale but grinning, lifted a lemonade. "To Mrs. Navarro," he said, voice rough but proud. "The woman who sent the reaper home empty-handed and made the boss smile like summer." Their first year tested and sealed them. Nell ran the clinic, then a second one-room infirmary in town. Teo balanced ledgers, mended fence, and pushed for safer trail practices. Boiled water, clean bedrolls, less whiskey and more sense. Reporters sniffed around this crescent moon miracle nurse, scribbling stories about the copper mare and the scar-jawed rancher who'd found a midwife on a frozen night and never let go. And because happiness never goes unchallenged, Caldwell arrived in Laramie in the spring of '89, papers in hand, righteous bile in his throat. He came to the ranch with a deputy and an oily smile. "Mrs. Navarro, or shall I say Miss Whitcomb?" Practicing medicine without license is a tidy little crime. "My wife holds certificates," Teo said, stepping between Caldwell and the clinic door. "Your nose healed crooked, I see." "Her moral character is in question," Caldwell purred. "The board in Baltimore threw him out for drunkenness last winter." Alma snapped from the porch, arms folded. "Word rides faster than a thief, mister." The deputy's hand hovered near his holster, but 30 riders drifted out of shadow like a weather change, faces unreadable. Teo's voice stayed mild. "Let's do this proper in town, with a judge who owns more sense than satin." The courthouse filled to the rafters 3 days later. A rancher swore to the son Neld saved breechwise in a blizzard. Doc Harlan, properly humbled, testified to her skill. The telegrapher read wires from St. Louis and Cheyenne praising her methods. Caldwell sweated under questions. His Baltimore history turned on him like a bad dog. The judge, who kept a silver harmonica in his vest and played it between cases, rapped his gavel. "Mrs. Navarro's certificates are recognized in this territory," he said. "Her practice is lawful. Mr. Caldwell, I suggest you board the next train east and rethink your hobbies." The cheer rolled out the door and down Main Street. Teo lifted Nell clear off the floor and spun her like a girl. "He can't touch you," he whispered. "He never could," she said, smiling into his shoulder. "Not where it matters. By 1892, the crescent moon had doubled its acres and halved its accidents. Nell opened the territory's first training class for nurses in a sunlit schoolroom off the Laramie Church Hall, teaching sanitation and sense to a dozen girls who'd never imagined themselves anything but hired help. Teo argued in the legislature for funding clean water and a day's wage for honest work. He founded a little town at the south fence line, Navarro Springs, with a school, a church, and a clinic bearing a simple sign, open at all hours if the heart is in danger. 3 children arrived like seasons, Alejandro and Owen, wild as colts in 90, and a daughter, Isela, in 92, with fists like tiny declarations. They grew up in the shadow of cottonwoods and stories. Alejandro learned to doctor with his mother's calm. Owen read weather like his father. Isela did both and bossed them sweetly. Years ran forward, as years do. Reporters still came, ink-thirsty for the tale that started in snow. Museum folks in Cheyenne framed Nell's first set of forceps and Teo's leather gloves. In Navarro Springs, a brass plate on the clinic door reads, Eleanor and Mateo Navarro, proof that a warm coat and a brave heart can change a map. When Teo's long life closed in 1924 at 85, the valley rang with harmonicas. Nell followed that autumn, the ache of absence heavier than her bones. They lie side by side on the hill above the creek, where the cottonwoods gossip and calves bawl in spring. The stone says only what needed saying, siempre, always. Folks still come west to stand at the old depot, to walk the ranch-turned-museum, to press their palms to the glass where a carpetbag sits with 3 silver coins and a faded photograph. They leave believing the same simple thing the story has always promised. In a land of big weather and bigger chances, the greatest fortune is sometimes a stranger's coat on a freezing night, and the life you decide to build after. If this retelling stirred you, drop your rating out of 10 below. It helps us keep these frontier hearts beating on the channel.